Welcome back to Mythic Slumber, where the quietest whispers of the past become your gentle guide to sleep. Tonight our journey is not one of history, but of a deep soul memory, a dream of humanity's peaceful dawn. We drift across the vast and tranquil Pacific to find the lost continent of Lemuria, or Mu, a paradise that is said to be the cradle of all consciousness. Find your most comfortable position. Let your breathing slow to the rhythm of a far and gentle tide, and allow the memory of this luminous forgotten world to carry you into a deep and restorative peace. If this journey into a world of soul memory brings you peace, a gentle light helps other weary travellers find this quiet ocean of slumber. The story begins as evening slides across the Pacific, and the air takes on that hushed brightness that belongs to water at rest, a softness that invites attention without asking for it, as if the horizon itself were leaning closer to hear what you are about to remember. A breeze moves in from far out carrying salt, the cool of mangroves, and the warm trace of sun that has just stepped off the day. It brings no command and no urgency. It brings a suggestion shaped like recognition. The familiar feeling you get when you arrive somewhere new and your heart says you've been here before. Follow that feeling to the veranda at the edge of the sea. The boards are warm from the last light. The rail fits the hand like a well-kept promise. Beyond it, the ocean lifts and settles steady as breath, and in the lift and settle, there is a voice that does not need a mouth, a voice that says there was once a continent that knew how to listen. Some called it Lemuria, some Mu, but the words are less important than the tone. The tone is low and even and sure, like the bass note in a song that never stops, and while you stand at the rail, the breeze lays that tone along your skin, and the skin knows it. Lemuria was not a rumour to frighten children, or a riddle to keep scholars awake. It was a way of being in daylight that did not wear daylight out. Imagine a coast of pearled sand that holds the moon cleanly when it visits at night. Grains so fine and so old that every step feels like reading a page without a single harsh word. Imagine lagoons that tilt turquoise to the sky and return every shade they borrow with thanks, where fish show the slow grammar of peace, one fin length at a time. Imagine gardens that do not fight the hill, terraces that follow the land's own curve the way a hand follows a shoulder, with care and with ease. On the paths and under the palms, people move the way well-made boats move when the tide is with them, balanced and purposeful, quiet without effort, never confusing speed with grace. There are cities, if you want to use that name, though it does not quite fit. They grow from the ground the way crystal grows, by a logic that is patient and bright, planes of living stone meeting in angles that teach the eye to rest. The buildings give off a low hum, not from machines hidden under floors, but from the stone's memory of rising. And as hands brush the columns in passing, the columns answer, a friendly vibration felt under the sternum, a hello exchanged without words. There are no gates, because gates would suggest a fear that does not belong here. There are no crowns, because heads have better work than wearing metal. There are no temples, because the continent has already agreed to be one, and to add a temple would be to repeat a sentence that has been completed perfectly. People pray by listening, and listening is a wide practice. A woman places her palm on a sapling until she can tell by the cooled air around its leaves that it wants afternoon shade. A mason stands at a crystal arch and sings a single tone, and the arch brightens by a shade, as if it had been asked to remember its first morning. Elders speak to one another with foreheads nearly touching, their voices so low that sound becomes warmth. Children are not told to be still. They are shown what stillness can give back, and they choose it as they choose sweet fruit, often and with delight. Even the animals have an ease that looks like courtesy when no one is startling them for sport. Dogs move among the market baskets as if browsing for stories. Birds leave room in their chatter for echoes that taste like rain. The hours are seeded rather than scheduled. Bread is baked when dough warms to agreement. A bath comes before a poem if steam insists, and the poem waits like a polite guest who enjoys the waiting. The only punctuality that matters is kindness arriving exactly when it is wanted, never crowding by coming too soon, never wounding by coming late. Work has edges but not knives. A weaver tunes her loom to the room's hum and guides the shuttle as if writing a letter to someone who already understands. A singer chooses a stairwell that keeps notes better than others and gives the stairwell a melody to put away for later, a jar of summer on the pantry shelf of stone. A gardener kneads soil until it relaxes in the hand and adds light to it with a mirror, not to command growth, but to offer invitation. If something breaks, it is mended in a way that reveals care rather than the crack, and when mending is finished, the thing is more itself than before. You can walk from the coast toward the interior where mountains set out their clear faces and make a slow conversation with the sun. As you go, vowels rise from the earth in long tones you can feel in your teeth. The land speaks in open O and round U and fine I, and the vowels are not symbols, they are instructions in the shape of comfort. The people learn their laws from those tones, and because of that the laws do not scrape. They widen the mouth and soften the throat. They ask the belly to join the mind. To live among such laws is to feel your edges become friendly. You're still you, but you're no longer forced to spend your day defending the borders of you. Telepathy here is not exhibition. It is a gentle way of keeping company. Privacy is not a fortress. It is the warmth of your edges when you wish to be on your own, and others see the warmth and smile and give you space without a word. Lemuria's light is a garment, and garments can be fitted and shared. Noon wraps the streets in clear brilliance, but it does not glare. Evening loosens the ties and lays brightness away neatly, fold by fold, until lanterns glow with a colour made for skin and conversation. Night is not an enemy. Night is a host who knows the quiet games and brings them out when it is time. Sound behaves the same way. Music grows like a vine, finding its trellis in the steady drone of the city, unfurling leaf and tendril until a bloom opens that you can smell with your ears. If a child sings off the line, there is no scolding. There's only the thrill of a new path connecting to the old one in a surprising place. A footbridge where no one expected it, but everyone uses it happily. From time to time, wind walks out to sea and returns with messages written in temperature and scent. Tonight it brings the oldest one, the one that tastes like mango and salt and a little iron from the stone. It says the continent is not a rumour in the strict daylight way, and it is not a myth in the dismissive way either. It is a memory your body keeps, the way the tongue keeps the shape of a favourite song, even when no one has sung it for years. You can feel that memory in small domestic moments. A cup sits well in the hand. A door opens without complaint. A face across a table is met without armour. The breeze teaches by repetition, and the repetition here is always relief. Not the blank relief of escape, but the rich relief of fit. The sense that the hour fits the human, and the human fits the hour, and nothing has to be shaved to make the pieces slide together. There is laughter, but it does not trample. There is sorrow, but it does not erode. There is change, but it does not arrive carrying a trumpet. When hard weather comes, people face it with the same measure they brought to easy weather and hard weather. Unsure how to punish such composure, weakens into ordinary weather more quickly than it planned. If a whale beaches, the town gathers not to mourn spectacle, but to help a being find the deeper line of water again. If a harvest is lighter one season, meals lengthen in conversation and shorten in drama. The deficit is not filled with noise, it is filled with care. The city is full of small loyalties. A step worn by certain feet is oiled by the person who always takes that step. A quiet contract between foot and wood. A beam that lights peach at a particular hour is watched for every evening by a neighbour who never grows bored of peach. A bell with a second note almost too soft to hear is rung once at dawn and once at dusk. And the real act is not the ringing but the listening after the sound, the choice to wait for the faint return and treat it as the important part. In this place, attention is not a scarce resource. It is the main fabric of the day. It stretches, it warms, it does not tear when pulled. If you asked where power lives here, you would not be led to a hall with chairs in a ring and carved backs. You would be led to a tide room under the city where water enters and leaves through polished channels and shells collect in tidy whirls. You would be shown seed libraries where shapes of colour sleep in translucent beads and wake at a fingertip's warmth. You would be taken to a courtyard where a single tree holds the last breath of its planter in its bark, and anyone who leans there can feel both the breath and the intention. Grow in peace. Shade. Those who are tired remind the quick that slowness has its own velocity. Power in Lemuria is the quiet certainty that care produces strength, and strength protects care, and the proof is everywhere, and no one hoards proof because proof is as common as wind. The breeze from that world travels far, and it does not get thinner, it gets clearer. It arrives at shores that have forgotten how to be gentle and makes them gentle for a while. It walks city streets that learn to shout, and it teaches them an indoor voice. It finds you where you are and places in your hand a small, precise image that you can carry into any morning. A bowl of clear water tuned to the pulse. A staircase that keeps songs. A window that holds warmth without stealing air. A table where eyes meet easily, and differences are greeted like a new spice rather than an alarm. These are not fantasies floating above responsibility. They are designs for ordinary hours that want to be kinder than they were yesterday. So the whisper on the ocean breeze is not only a story about a place you can point to on an old map, or annotate in a margin with doubt and debate. It is a remembered setting for the mind and the heart. It is a blueprint that does not need lines, only intentions that fold into action, the way cloth folds into use. Stand at the rail with that breeze on your face and you can feel the pattern lay itself out. Ask first, listen long, do the simple thing with full attention, make beauty the path of least resistance, return what you borrow, pass along what you learn, and let your life hum in a key that does not tire the ear. The Pacific keeps breathing. The stars keep checking their small lamps and are pleased by how steady they glow. Somewhere beyond the margin of charts, a continent practiced this posture so well that even after it changed rooms, the posture remained. The breeze has brought it to you. Hold it as long as you like. When you put it down, it will still be there, in the air, waiting for the next willing listener, unchanged by distance, certain as tide. Picture a continent that meets the ocean not with a hard edge but with a necklace of bays, lagoons and shells of quiet water. each curve made by patience and each inlet holding a different shade of blue, from milk glass at the shore to deep sapphire where coral gardens fall away like terraces for the moon. Along these margins the sand is pale rose and pearl, not from dye or myth, but from a long conversation between time and broken light. Walk it, and you feel the soft ascent of a shore that has decided you may pass. The water speaks in small, even syllables. When it lifts, it carries silver flecks and the smell of clean stone. When it settles, it leaves behind tiny hieroglyphs of foam that tell you, in a script anyone can read, that peace is an active tide and not an absence. From the beach the land rises in gentle plains, as if it had exhaled and kept the shape of the breath. Hills wear forests that are bright without shouting. Palms that murmur, ferns that keep their own cool weather, flowers that glow as if they remember starlight from a nearer life. Paths run where roots say they may. Stairs are convinced from the earth, not cut. You pass under canopies tuned by wind, broad leaves lapping at one another like pages turned by a thoughtful thumb, and every few moments a drift of fragrance crosses the way. Mango just opened, vanilla sun-warmed on a vine, the green quiet perfume that comes from water sitting happily in rock for exactly the right length of time. In sunlit clearings, low pools collect the day and return it softer, and the air above them looks slightly thick, like honey shaken once and set down to settle. The inland waters are their own soft civilization. Rivers are quick where they like to be and lazy where they prefer to think. In the lazy places, schools of small fish lean in the same direction like sentences that agree. You see bridges here, but they are not declarations. They are continuations, crystal grown to join one shore to the other in a single patient arc, with handrails that hold the memory of many hands and answer the palm with a faint approving tone. Sometimes the bridge is a fallen tree that the forest has chosen not to lift. Sometimes it's a path of stepping stones that shows itself only when the river is in the mood. Sometimes the crossing is a boat you guide by listening to the current's quiet grammar. Nothing hurries you. Everything has its pace and invites you to match it for a while. The mountains rise at last, not as walls but as hosts. Faces of translucent rock catch the morning and pour it slowly into the valleys. At noon they gleam in plains that teach you the word facet from inside your eyes. Toward evening they keep the last light the way a fine bowl keeps warmth after tea. Crystal outcrops lean toward one another like thoughtful elders in conversation, and between them broad meadows lie in greens you could name if naming did not feel like an interruption. Here and there falls of water go from thread to silken scarf to veil, and at their feet shallow basins shine with a pale blue that looks like the memory of old sky. Moss handles the ground gently, making cushions for whoever wishes to sit. Roots travel under the surface like the handwriting of someone who loves long letters and takes care over every loop. You begin to notice how the continent composes itself. It prefers repetition with variation, a rhythm of bay, reef, cusp, lagoon along the outer rim, a rhythm of rise, shelf, fall, river inland, a rhythm of open meadow, thin grove, clearing, spring as you approach the heights. The pattern is not a grid, it's a song form. You learn the refrain, curve that welcomes, water that clarifies, light that rounds, and once you know it, you hear it everywhere. Even clouds obey. They arrive in families small and well-mannered, and hang in formations that mimic the geography beneath them. Little archipelagos of shade, islands floating above islands. When rain chooses to speak, it begins as a fine script and then thickens to a kind, steady handwriting. Everything that needs the message receives it, and when the message is finished, the air returns to its other work, carrying fragrance and carrying ease. Life here is abundant without crowding. Orchids fasten themselves in crooks with the tact of guests who know how to bring their own chairs. Vines write cursive across the under canopy and leave generous margins. Groves of breadfruit and star apple punctuate the slopes like commas that make the sentence flow. In the low sunlight, fields of taro show a polish that looks like an invitation to touch, and when you do touch, a handprint of cool remains for a moment, as if the plant had retained a little cloud just for this exchange. Birds trade gossip in bright syllables, but pause often to reconsider. Butterflies spend a full afternoon inventing reasons to cross a path. Lizards accept the role of punctuation and play it with style. In tide pools, anemones open and close with the beat of the sea's wrist, and small crabs take the long way home because the long way has better views. The human making tucked into this garden does not break the sentence, it finishes it. Where you expect walls, you find thresholds. Where you expect corners, you find curves that conclude with grace. Homes are grown from latticework crystal and living wood. Roofs shine with a skin of leaf and thin stone that keeps out the loud of weather and invites the soft. Floors are set to the tuning of the place. One room that sings in a low, sustaining pitch for thinking or healing. Another that holds a lighter, bright tone fit for laughter and bread. A third that keeps the twilight key where stories travel best. Windows are not holes cut from a barrier. They are places where the material decides to be transparent. Standing inside feels like standing in a thought the land is having about you, and it is a kind thought. Food here tastes like agreement. Fish come from waters that never learned bitterness. You can taste the current's courtesy. Fruit offers a texture that seems to have been imagined just for teeth and tongue to get along. Grains and roots bring a steadiness that stays with you for hours and never insists upon its own importance. Meals happen on verandas and terraces, under trees and beside tide rooms where water arrives and leaves with conversational regularity. Talk is low, laughter is true, and sometimes silence is the main course, and everyone finishes it with gratitude. When a breeze moves across the table, it is not a theft of warmth, it is a page turning to the next good part. At night, the continent edits itself into a softer script. The crystal of halls and arches holds a residual glow like the last lines of a favourite story read under a blanket. The ocean steps closer in sound, not in distance, a deeper hush that seems to come from the floor of the world. Far reefs spark once or twice with brief drifting stars, and in lagoons the dark is not black but blue, with secrets you're not required to solve. Constellations find their places with tidy satisfaction and perform their patient work, marking the seasons for navigators, leaving the children with familiar shapes to count and rename, sending a cool permission down into bedrooms where rest arrives quickly and stays without asking for proof of anything. Dawn begins from the edges inward. First a chalking of light along the curve of water, then a silver on frond and blade, then a warming of stone until the breath notices. Birds rehearse their lines in small phrases, and by the time the sun shows a shoulder above the sea, the whole garden has reset itself to the day's key. People step into paths with bowls to fill, and tools to carry, and songs that match the pace of the hour. The island breathes the people, and the people breathe the island. There is no argument here about who belongs to whom. Each belongs to each, by daily practice rather than decree. If you seek a single image to hold the feeling of Mu as a garden in the sea, take this. A cliffside where clear stone meets a long jade pool. A tree leaning from the lip with roots braided through crystal like fingers laced. A narrow stair coaxed from the rock that carries feet down to water, smooth as a held note. A bowl set at the bottom step to catch what the swimmers bring back from the deep. A shell with a song still inside. A pebble that remembers a volcano's heart. A handful of cold that tastes like clarity. Above, clouds make small islands as shade over the island below. Below, fish make a grammar of silver. Between them, the air keeps the peace and invites you to keep it too. This is Mu's face when it smiles. Abundance answering restraint. Beauty answering use. The sea and the land finishing each other's sentences until the whole paragraph reads, "Welcome, stay, be well." They were tall, yes, but not in the way that announces itself. Their height read as ease, long backs, loose shoulders, a calm reach that made every task look like the right size. Skin carried the daylight honestly. Honey warm near the shore, bronze in the terraces, moonlit along the high pools, never one colour, always a conversation with light. Hair fell like water taught to stay, sometimes braided with seed floss or threads of copper, sometimes cut short to honour a new season. Faces held that look you see in seasoned sailors and gardeners, alert without edge, soft at the corners, eyes that can track a cloud and a mood at the same time. The first people of Mu moved, as if the ground had been tuned to them. Steps landed heel to toe with a listening you could feel from across a courtyard. Hands spoke. A palm on a column said, "I'm here." 2 fingers on a friend's forearm said, "With you." The sweep of a hand over a basin said, "Begin." They did not waste motion. They did not hoard it either. Children ran when running was play and walked when walking was company. Elders walked a little like waves. Forward, then a small pause, giving their thoughts time to keep up. Clothing was made to be lived in rather than admired at distance. Looms pulled light into fibre, undyed linen that kept the body honest in heat, seagrass cords that flexed and forgot you, woven belts that carried knife and shell and a folded strip of parchment leaf for notes. Festival garments were colour held with respect. Saffron, lagoon blue, plum skin, the soft green of breadfruit shade, stitched with tiny mirrors of polished pearl that caught just enough sun to remind a shoulder that it was there. No piece announced rank. Ornament told stories. A wristband threaded with 3 seeds meant 3 journeys. A brooch of hammered gold in the curve of a crescent reef meant a promise kept. A line of tiny shell buttons down the spine meant someone you loved liked to count them while you read. Work did not define anyone, but work revealed them clearly. A healer walked with the steadiness of a lamp on a calm night. A navigator scanned shadows as if they were letters and found meaning in the negative spaces. A singer tasted the air before speaking, as if asking the room what key it preferred today. Craft was apprenticeship to place. People learned their art from those who had learned from the land. You knew a good potter by the way a bowl wanted to sit, a good mason by the way. Rain paused on a ledge and then moved on happily. A good grower by the quiet at a meal when a first bite made the table nod in unison. Telepathy was ordinary, but it was not spectacle. Think of it as shared quiet with pictures. You sent a touch of colour, the weight of a memory, the outline of a need. You received the same, and you made room for it without rummaging. Privacy was honoured with the same care you give to ripening fruit. Do not poke, do not rush, keep nearby warmth, wait for the fragrance that means now. Lovers rarely asked questions with words. Lovers learned each other's weather. Families braided their minds morning and night for a moment, a brief plait in which the day's worries lost their sting, and the day's joys doubled back to be enjoyed again. Disagreements did not vanish in a telepathic world, they softened. It is harder to invent a villain when you can feel someone else's ache the way you feel a pebble in your own shoe. Their science was not a tower of proofs, but a long, bright table of practices. They measured by resonance. Want to know if a bridge is ready? Hum at its root and feel the return. Want to know if a child is overtired? Listen at the back of the neck where the small muscles keep score. Want to know where to plant a tree? Strike a tuning rod in the soil and follow the path where the note is fullest. They studied the sun without burning and the stars without worship, drawing from both a grammar of cycles that made prediction feel more like remembering. Sundials were pools, calendars were fields. The night sky did not hang above them. It ran through them like a second bloodstream. Every home kept a little altar without doctrine. A clear bowl of water, a smooth stone, a leaf cut clean from its stem, a thread from a garment that had seen good days. At dawn, someone of the house breathed onto the water and traced a circle. At dusk, someone else breathed again and smoothed the surface. The act was simple, the effect real. People slept better knowing their small weather had been seen and set down. Children learned early that a worry placed in the bowl was not a worry for long. The water held its shape until morning and then gave it back to the sea, which knew what to do with it. They stewarded animals as fellow citizens. Dogs ran errands, carrying ribbon messages from garden to garden, and returned for praise rather than pay. Goats grazed in maps drawn by children, eating invasives first because the maps told them the order, and the goats, being wiser than their reputation, complied. Birds learned melodies that matched the rhythm of seed scattering. On certain breezes you could hear a sowing song moving across terraces, sung by throats that had never held a tool. Fish sanctuaries braided through the reef. Elders marked their boundaries with glass bells whose low note told spearfishers where not to enter. Protection was not an argument. Protection was a tone the body respected. Justice felt different in Mu. It did not elevate punishment. It elevated repair. If someone cut a tree without asking, and sometimes someone did, there was no public spectacle. There was a walk. The one who cut was brought to the grove at noon, and sat with those who tended that grove. They touched the stump together and named the uses the tree had given. They stood in its shade that was no longer there. They learned the patience of rings by laying their hands on older trunks. Then they worked, planting, watering, singing, not as penance, but as stitching. When the new growth took, the matter ended itself. People did not carry a ledger around their necks. They carried the memory of being rewoven. Festivals kept the year honest. There was the first light, when doors and shutters stood open, and lamps were polished with salt and oil until they remembered their brightest verse. There was the deep water, when families walked to the tide rooms and floated wax boats with 4 small flames, gratitude, learning, health, play, and watched which flame burned longest, a playful omen for the months ahead. There was the long story, held when winds were gentle and fruit heavy. Storytellers braided history and dream until the border dissolved, and children learned, without anyone saying it directly, that truth has more than one flavour, and all of them can nourish. They loved beginnings, but they respected endings just as much. Farewells were composed. A person leaving on a voyage did not vanish with a shout and a wave. They walked the circuit of their little world, the step that always creaked, the shell that made a stubborn note, the friend who kept a particular chair, and left each with a sentence. Be patient with your next foot. Sing when you wish, not when asked. Save my place, or don't, I'll find a new one. Return was an art, absence too. Nothing melted into nothingness. Everything found its next shape. Were they perfect? No. Perfection was not desirable. They had tempers, and weather had tricks, and hunger bit sometimes when seasons misjudged one another. But the systems they lived inside made it hard for a single misstep to ripple into ruin. Redundancy was built into kindness. A garden failed. A neighbour's garden leaned closer. A navigator fell ill. 3 apprentices already knew the night's grammar. A singer lost her voice. The stairwell kept her songs until spring. Fragility existed, but it did not sit on a throne. What made them children of the sun and stars was not ancestry in the grand sense. It was apprenticeship to 2 steady teachers. From the sun they learned radiance without dominance. Shine enough to see by, but do not blind. From the stars they learned pattern without rigidity. Move in relation, not in isolation. Their days held both lessons. They lit what they touched. They kept their places by keeping each other in view. And when they spoke of origin, they used neither conquest nor accident. They used belonging. We are of this light, they said, and of that distance, and of the space between, and the space between is where our voices fit. So when you picture the first people of Lemuria, do not imagine a fantasy beyond reach. Picture a mood that became a culture and stayed long enough to teach its manners. Hands that check in with stone, voices that check in with air, minds that check in with minds before the loudness starts. Picture a life made of well-measured chords. Picture a crowd that feels like a choir even when no one is singing. They were tall. They were graceful. Mostly they were precise in their care. Under a sky that never hurried them, on a continent that kept every promise it could, they practiced a simple, brilliant craft. Being human at room temperature, warmed by the sun, patterned by the stars, and bright enough to see one another clearly. From a distance the cities looked less like construction, and more like an agreement the land had reached with light. Facets rose the way frost grows across a window when winter is patient. Plane meeting, planing clean decisions, curves arriving where angles had already said enough. The first impression was clarity. The second was listening. Even before you set foot on a street you could feel a tone in your ribs, a low, even hum that changed as you approached, as if the city were tuning itself to your presence and asking in return to be tuned by you. No mason had forced these shapes. Crystal has been invited up from the bedrock by songs and diagrams and slow touch, and once it arrived it kept singing. Streets followed the grain of resonance rather than the tyranny of straight lines. You could stand at a junction and hear where to go next. The eastward lane held a bright F, good for markets and meetings. The lane to the terraces carried around a D, fit for bread and stories. The path toward the observatory hummed in a slender B that sharpened thought without thinning joy. Wayfinding was as simple as humming back and feeling which road answered most kindly. Underfoot the paving was a mosaic of clear plates and milk glass bars set on fine cushions of root and sand, so that footsteps landed like chords, never clatter. Children learned early to walk a triad across a square heel to heel, laughing when the stone answered in harmony. Houses began as lattices grown from seed crystals, coaxed upward in frameworks that remembered how rain flows and how heat disperses. Living wood threaded itself through the lattice, making shade where shade made sense. Walls were not barriers, they were instruments. In the morning they opened to let the sea carry its cool into rooms. At noon the facets narrowed and scattered glare into workable light. By late day they went translucent gold and made everyone handsome. Each home kept a resonance niche, a shallow alcove grown to the pitch of the family's comfort, where a hum or a bowl struck softly could re-centre a mood in a breath or two. You did not need to talk about the argument once the alcove had done its work. The air had already folded the edges down. Public halls were tuned like fine instruments and maintained like gardens. A council chamber might hold a generous A that allowed many voices to share the same width without crowding. A school would keep a ladder of tones from low to bright so that lessons could climb without strain. The healing house sat on a bed of slow stone and kept a velvet sea, thick, warm, convincing. There, light came filtered through panes etched with shallow geometries that broke the sun into calm. Threads of colour travelled across the floor with the day, and practitioners read those threads as doctors elsewhere read pulses. Lie here where the green passes, they would say, and the body, met by its preferred colour, remembered how to soften. The city did not fight weather, it conversed with it. When rain came, roof facets slid droplets along channels that sang a little as they ran, the pitch changing with volume, not to impress but to inform. High winds raised deeper notes from vents cut like flutes, a warning and a reassurance. Yes, the world is moving quickly. Yes, the city has flex to spare. During heat, the street plates let their stored, cool vapour rise through hairline seams, a gentle exhale you could see in the right slant of light. On winter nights, yes, even near the equator night can pretend winter. Ledges held cups of captured day and let them go slowly. Residents warmed their hands at beams as if greeting old friends. Libraries held books, but the first layer of archive was tone. Vaulted rooms stored chords the way cellars store wine. A visitor could request the midsummer market at noon, and a keeper would set a crystal cylinder spinning, and the air would fill with the low, delighted murmur of bargaining footsteps, small brass clinks, somebody's song in the back lane. Another cylinder kept the dusk in a particular colonnade when the tide came high and the pillars answered one another across the water. People borrowed these soundscapes the way others borrow maps to remember what a place teaches just by being itself. The written archive came next. Vellum made from palm fibre lacquered with salt, inks brewed from soot and berry and crushed shell. Texts were spare, diagrams abundant. The city preferred proof you could feel with your hand. Craft districts were orchestras of usefulness. In the glass quarter, furnaces glowed the colour of pomegranate hearts. Blowers shaped bells with lips that could hold a second note, that ghost of a tone which keeps you listening after the ring has gone. In the metal lanes, copper and bronze took curves that echoed shorelines and reefs, never knife-bright unless knife-bright was needed. Toolmakers tested handles against light and sound, tuning grip and balance by how a chisel sang when tapped. Textiles emerged from looms threaded with hair-fine crystals in the warp. Fabrics carried a very faint shimmer in shade, not ostentation, more like the residue of moonlight on a river. Clothes from here moved well in wind and told the eyes what the body intended: work, celebration, quiet. Festival architecture rose and sank with the calendar. Pavilions grew in a month from seed nodes, held their shapes for a season of dance and exchange, then were sung back down, their facets dissolving into shards the city scattered through its foundations. Nothing sat empty to sulk. Even stadiums were temporary, amphitheatres of stepped crystal cut into slopes where strawberries later ran, and goats held committee. When the games returned, the ground remembered and rose again. Memory was not a burden. It was a gentle spring in the step of stone. Transport played to the city's tuning. Along canals, skiffs with hulls like folded glass slid from pool to pool, each pool tuned to a different civic, tone, market, learning, healing, craft. And you could drift from intention to intention, with no more effort than pushing away from a wharf. On terraces, moving paths of tessellated plates advanced at walking pace, their pressure systems powered by the same lung of water that fed the tide rooms. Above, a lattice of gliding lines let kites carry messages and small parcels from quarter to quarter. The lines sang just audibly, so that birds would not collide and children could track wishes across the sky. Night pulled a different city forward. Lantern vines woke, their small bladders of trapped light glowing along colonnades like a spilled constellation. Bridges became harps. Each step set off a soft interval that never repeated quite the same way twice, a courtesy to late walkers who preferred surprise to lullaby. Watchers, more listeners than guards, strolled the rounds with hand gongs that answered the city's pitch each hour, a call and response between person and place that reassured both. From the observatory hill, a beam of pearl climbed into the sky, not to brag at stars, but to write a local coordinate for navigators at sea. You are here, and here is with us. The city's taught citizenship by design. When every surface answers you, you learn to answer back. People repaired cracks as soon as they heard a tone drift off by a hair. It was a neighbourly act. Children found work by following their favourite sounds, the sharp kisses of chisel on stone, the murmur of traders, the syrupy drone of fermenting rooms, the crisp punctuation of ink stamps, the glassmaker's hiss. Apprenticeship began with listening. "What does this place want from you?" mentors asked, and the good answer was never conquest. It was cooperation. A hall wishing for laughter, a stair asking to carry songs, a key needing feet at dawn. Visitors who came by luminous boat felt the tuning within minutes. Some tried to whisper and discovered their voices already at the right volume. Some felt their pulse steady at corners where the geometry was particularly kind. A few cried without knowing why. The city took nothing from them. It simply offered the relief of being met by a world that had decided long ago to be legible, generous, and exact. This clarity did not exclude complexity. It organised complexity into music. And when the rumour of the turning cycle began, the cities responded like virtuosi easing a symphony toward its closing movement. Builders walked the avenues and laid final lines of geometry at the bases of pillars, a notation that told water how to enter without panic. Bellkeepers tuned the harbour chimes down a half step so that the swell would not excite them into frenzy. Healers moved cots to rooms with more forgiving resonance. The observatory wrote its last local coordinate in a colour that would live happily underwater. No one nailed boards across windows. No one stacked stones in defiance. They changed key with the season. To stand in a crystal city of Lemuria was to feel your own life tuned not to a narrow pitch of goodness, but to a wide chord in which goodness was one strong note among many. Use, beauty, clarity, mercy, play. There were no monuments to victory. The monuments were to accuracy, a bridge that always said yes to feet, a bath that always remembered the right temperature, a plaza that held a conversation in a bowl of warm air and sent everyone home thinking a little better of being alive. In such places the word miracle retired early. The ordinary had taken over its job. There was no throne to visit because authority was not a chair. It was a habit of care shared in common, practiced until it felt like weather. The day arranged itself without a shout. Dawn arrived to open shutters, hands opened bread, water opened its cool at the tide rooms, and the people of Mu opened to one another with the ease of neighbours who have rehearsed welcome so many times that welcome no longer needs rehearsal. In a land tuned to resonance, the loudest thing was kindness doing its work. Without kings, hierarchy dissolved into stewardship. Roles flowed like canals, clearly cut, well tended and never confused with rivers. A keeper of bridges knew the names of load and span and how stone breathes at noon. A keeper of seeds knew how to store the future in translucent beads that hold their own small moon. A keeper of stories knew where memory prefers to rest in the mouth, and how to coax it forward with the right rhythm. None of these keepers stood above the others. They stood beside. When a question arose, people walked toward the one whose listening had the right shape for that question, and the answer appeared the way light appears in clear water when the cloud lifts a corner. Religion did not sit in a building because the world had already volunteered its rooms. Prayer happened as the slight straightening of a back before a task. Devotion happened as the extra minute taken to sand a threshold smooth for bare feet. Contemplation happened over a bowl of rinsed rice, while the last starch spiraled away like an old worry losing interest. If someone wished for something like ceremony, they chose a place where the land's pitch met their own, a low cave where voices rounded and became generous, a cliff ledge where wind filed the mind to clarity, the resonance niche in a home where a tone could gather scattered thoughts and usher them to a seat. Leadership was seasonal, specific, and reversible. When storms gathered, the navigators led. When harvest swelled, the growers did. When dispute flickered, the mediators stepped softly into the centre and cooled the room. A leader was simply the person who, in that hour, could hear the city most accurately. The proof of having led well was how quickly the role could be set down again, like a tool wiped clean and returned to the wall. Ambition existed, but it had nowhere sticky to attach. The culture buffed it smooth. A child who loved to be first learned the sweeter satisfaction of being exact. A speaker who loved to be heard learned to thicken silence so others could rise inside it. Commerce kept its voice low and its pulse healthy. Markets stretched along bright lanes, and each stall was a small promise kept. Fish that tasted of clean current, fruit that arrived at ripeness and never boasted, cloth with the right hand for the right season. Pricing was a conversation, not a contest. Value measured by effort, rarity, and the subtle pleasure of good use. Barter braided with coin the way vines braid, a trellis, both strengthened by the other. Makers stamped their work with marks that told stories. This bowl cured through 7 dawns, this knife tempered to the pitch of rain, this lantern tuned to corridors where laughter likes to linger, and buyers answered with the praise that matters most. They used the thing until it wore out gracefully. Justice travelled light. There were no cells because there was nowhere to lock anyone that would be safer than being braided back into the community. When harm happened, the The question was not how to punish, but where is the tear and who knows how to stitch it? A broken oath was brought to the place where oaths are made, often a simple table bright with use, and remade in the presence of those whose lives had been snared by the break. A theft sent the taker and the taken into a week of shared making. They cooked, they mended, they built a short wall or a long path, and in the rhythm of joined labour, suspicion, bored by usefulness, wandered off. Repeat harm was rare, and when it appeared it was treated as illness. Diagnosis first, treatment next, fear last. Education was apprenticeship to clarity. Children learned to read the city's tones before letters, to walk the triads of a plaza before they walked alone to the reef, to taste water for story, river, cistern, rain, before they tasted strong tea. Lessons moved through the day in the same key as errands, and the signs of mastery were simple: a bowl that sat true on an uneven table, a bridge that kept its cord through winter, a poem that cooled the brow at noon. The brightest students learned to slow a task until the task began to teach them back. Homes held the blueprint of the culture. A house asked without words, "How can I help?" And then it did, shading what overheated, brightening what dimmed, tuning rooms to the steady pitches of thinking, laughter and rest. Meals framed the hours. A mid-morning table might hold bread, salted fruit, a small bowl of tangy broth. The talk would braid work plans with fragments of last night's dreams. A map would be drawn in crumbs and corrected in smiles. Evening brought lanterns that threw good shadows for faces, and plates in which the day could relax without spilling. Guests seldom left with leftovers. They left with a sentence or a tone they could use tomorrow. Festivals were the city reminding itself of what it already knew. There was the Festival of Resonance, when houses opened their alcoves and people made a slow pilgrimage from tone to tone, letting each pitch put a different shine on the same heart. There was the making fair, when apprentices displayed first works beside masters' pieces, and the measure was not perfection, but fidelity to listening. There was the quiet night, a favourite. Lights lowered, voices dropped to the level of tide, and across the whole city everyone tried to hear the second note of the bell, that nearly invisible return that proves attention has muscles. Animals took part in civic life with dignity. The reef had its resting sanctuaries. Hills had corridors no foot disturbed in nesting season. Dogs wore ribbons that let the market know whose errands they were running. The city's design made selfishness awkward. A shout echoed back wrong. A grab threw the hand off the balance. A lie soured the taste of water. Truth, by contrast, fit the mouth and made the day smoother. In such a place, virtue did not require heroic exertion. It required noticing what already worked and refusing to interrupt it. Without temples, reverence became portable. People carried it the way a musician carries tuning in their hands. On a walk up the terraces you might see a person pause, touch the rail, breathe once and continue, having just conducted a quiet service for the well-being of wood. In a storm you might watch neighbours wait a roof corner with sandbags, and between the lift and set down a tiny rite would pass. Eye contact, a nod, a muttered gratitude to the beam that held. No audience, no priest, only competence folded into love. All of this could have turned precious. It did not, because humour patrolled the borders. A mason with the chipped chisel was teased affectionately until he let someone sharpen it. A singer who over-decorated a plain tune was invited to the stairwell that kept her old songs and asked to listen to who she had been. Children invented a game called King for a Minute, where one friend tried to order the others and promptly discovered how boring it felt to command people who already knew what to do. Laughter kept the sacred from stiffening. What held the whole together was a simple reflex repeated at every scale. Ask, listen, adjust. A bridge asked the river and listened to the span and adjusted the pier. A family asked the season and listened to the garden and adjusted the meal. A city asked the horizon and listened to the wind and adjusted its key. No temples, no kings, because in Mu, a life of harmony was not enforced from above or performed in a single place. It flowed from below and within. 1,000 accurate kindnesses laid end to end until the day itself became a soft, continuous rite, and everyone, guests, neighbours, stones, dogs, tide, knew their part and played it well. The night sky above Lemuria was not a ceiling, it was a mirror. The people of Mu did not look upward and see distance, they looked outward and saw kinship. Each star was a relative, a teacher, a gentle reminder that the same brilliance that burned in the heavens also lived quietly in their own hearts. They called the stars the Great Choir, and they believed the universe itself was singing, a song made of frequency and light, and that every being, every tree, every grain of sand carried a note within that song. To live rightly, they said, was to stay in tune. From the first breath of their civilization, the Lemurians treated the cosmos not as a mystery to conquer, but as an elder whose wisdom could be received through attention. They did not build telescopes of glass and metal, but pools of still water and circles of translucent stone that captured starlight and bent it gently into the eye. They learned that when you quiet the body enough, when you calm the heart until it beats, in even measure with the tide, the stars stop being far. They shimmer in the mind as if they are whispering their stories directly through thought. Their observatories were open sanctuaries, no domes, no walls, only terraces carved from crystal and polished to a sheen that held the reflection of the sky without distortion. There, astronomers and poets sat side by side, their tasks indistinguishable. One mapped the heavens by vibration, noting how certain constellations hummed in different pitches depending on the phase of the moon. Another transcribed those hums into music, playing them on instruments of quartz and lightwood until the air itself remembered. Each note corresponded to a star. Each melody corresponded to an orbit. Music was astronomy. Astronomy was prayer. Their science began with listening. They discovered that every living thing resonated with a unique tone, what they called the heart frequency. Plants grew best when sung to in that tone. Water purified itself when exposed to it. Even wounds closed faster when their surrounding air was filled with matching resonance. They believed disease was merely dissonance, the body's song having fallen out of key with the greater harmony. The cure was not to fight, but to retune. Healers used instruments shaped like tuning forks made of luminous metal, striking them softly and holding them above the affected area until the vibration settled into agreement. When the tone matched the patient's own heartbeat, pain dissolved like salt in warm rain. They spoke often of the geometry of breath. The Lemurians understood geometry not as a study of shapes, but as the memory of divine design, patterns through which the universe builds itself again and again. The spirals of shells, the branching of rivers, the crystalline lattice of their cities, these were expressions of the same equation, form following vibration. They taught their children that beauty was a sign of alignment, and that ugliness was not sin but imbalance. A building that sang in tune would stand for centuries without cracking. A garden that followed sacred ratio would bear fruit sweeter than any unmeasured grove. Their mathematics was art that healed. Their art was mathematics made merciful. When they gazed upon the Milky Way, they saw not a scattering of stars, but a luminous river flowing through eternity, a path along which souls once travelled before birth, and to which they would return when the body had finished its work. Death to them was not an end, but a modulation. The spirit's vibration slipped into a new octave, still part of the same song. At night, families would gather in the open air, their hearth a slow-burning bowl of phosphorescent stones, and they would hum the notes of remembrance for those who had crossed over. The tone rose softly, a single unified chord that floated upward, merging with the sky's shimmering current until it was impossible to tell where breath ended and starlight began. In their myths, the first Lemurians did not descend from the stars. They awoke when the stars touched the ocean. They believed that long before the continents took shape, a luminous mist settled upon the waters of earth, carrying within it the seeds of consciousness. Where that light touched the sea, life began to dream of itself. The Lemurians were the dreamers of that dream, the first beings to awaken, knowing both their cosmic origin and their earthly purpose. Their skin, they said, once glowed faintly in twilight, reflecting the memory of that union between sea and star. Many legends told of a time when they could commune directly with celestial beings, what they called the Elder Lights. Not gods, not masters, but fellow travellers on higher frequencies of being. The Lemurians built no idols for them. They simply listened in meditation until the inner sky of the mind opened, and patterns of colour and tone descended, gifts of knowledge shaped like sound. Through this communion they learned the principles of energy flow, magnetism and light. They used these not to dominate matter but to cooperate with it. Where others might have built engines, they built harmonizers, towers that caught solar resonance by day and lunar resonance by night, circulating gentle waves of energy through their cities like the pulse of a living heart. Their relationship to power was intimate and humble. They did not harness nature, they befriended it. The tides powered their irrigation. The shifting of minerals beneath the crust guided their construction. Even lightning was welcomed, its energy captured by tall crystalline spires that sang when struck, converting storm into melody. They found that joy itself was an energy source. When a crowd laughed together, the air brightened measurably. When a city entered collective meditation, its nightlights dimmed as if the very stones were breathing with them, needing less illumination because everyone's hearts glowed. Their calendar followed the music of the cosmos rather than arbitrary counting. Each year was composed of harmonic seasons, periods where the earth aligned with specific constellations whose tones influenced growth, creativity, and introspection. Farmers tuned their songs to those constellations. Artists began new works when the Veil star rose. Healers favoured months when the blue spectrum dominated the heavens. Children born under certain chords were said to have natural gifts. Some could feel when a storm would come. Others could sing to calm the wind. A few could remember places they had never seen and describe them in precise detail, as if recalling from another life lived among the stars. Despite their cosmic intimacy, they were never proud. Awe kept them humble. To know you are made of starlight is not to boast, it is to bow deeper. They taught that the highest wisdom was light carried quietly. A true sage was not the one who glowed brightest, but the one whose glow made others visible. There were legends of teachers who could summon spheres of pure radiance that floated above their palms, but when asked how, they would smile and say, "By forgetting myself for a moment." Every home had a corner devoted to the heavens, a small window angled precisely toward one guiding star. Families would begin the day with a glance toward that star, thanking it for keeping the rhythm of the world, and end the evening by offering it their stillness in return. It was not worship, it was synchronization. Just as their hearts beat with the sea's pulse, their minds rested in step with the slow turning of the cosmos. They believed that harmony was not achieved by escaping the world, but by aligning perfectly within it, each person a note, each note necessary. In that alignment they found serenity that modern minds might mistake for magic. But to the Lemurians it was simple physics wrapped in reverence. Light spoke to light. Sound recognized sound. The cosmos was their scripture, and every dawn was a new verse written across the wide blue sky. To live, to breathe, to be kind, to build with beauty, to love without possession. These were not commandments. They were the natural consequence of being in tune. And as the stars burned on in their patient symphony, Lemuria, glowing like a quiet chord upon the sea, answered in kind, its crystal towers shimmering in the night like instruments playing along with the universe itself. The connection between ancient civilizations and the stars is a tale told in many myths. If there is another lost paradise or a different star-born legend you wish to dream of, you can whisper your suggestion in the comments. Your curiosity often charts the course for our next voyage. Every world, no matter how luminous, must one day breathe out. The Lemurians knew this, just as they knew that dawn is not a victory over night, but its continuation. In their deepest teachings, it was said that the earth itself moves through long rhythms, vast inhalations and exhalations of energy that shape continents, tides, and hearts alike. Each cycle brings birth, flowering, rest, and renewal. And now, as their great age drew near its close, the people of Lemuria began to feel the slow turning of that ancient wheel. It began softly, like a change in key. The tones of their crystal cities shifted, just slightly, when struck by morning light. Pools that once reflected stars with perfect clarity began to shimmer with faint tremors beneath the surface. Birds delayed their migrations, flowers opened a little later, and the hum of the earth, which the Lemurians had always known as steady and warm, took on a deeper, slower note. To most, these were not omens of dread, but the first measures of a new movement in the eternal song. Change, to them, was sacred. The elders gathered in the open squares where the air still shimmered with the breath of the sea. They listened, not for words but for resonance. They felt the planets shift as one might feel a friend sigh after long laughter. "The age is turning," they said quietly, their voices free of fear. "We have sung this note well. Now it is time to prepare for the next." There was no decree, no panic, no prophecy of wrath. The Lemurians simply began to live more slowly, more intentionally, as if they were memorizing the beauty around them before it changed shape. Even the youngest could sense it. Children who once played among the tide gardens began to linger, tracing circles in the sand that resembled the spirals of galaxies. Animals moved closer to human dwellings, calm and unafraid, as if seeking comfort in shared awareness. Nights grew longer, but not colder. The stars seemed to bend lower, their light thicker and more tender. The ocean grew restless, yes, but it was not angry. Its waves spoke like a mother's voice, reminding her children that it was time to come home. In their observatories and sanctuaries of sound, The Lemurian scholars confirmed what intuition had already told them. The magnetic pulse of the world was realigning. The poles were whispering to each other across the core. Energy was gathering deep beneath the crust, not in chaos but in rhythm. They charted it not as disaster but as breath, an exhalation long foretold. One elder, Ashura of the Western Isles, wrote, "The earth does not fall asleep from weariness. She dreams herself anew. We will dream with her." Preparations were quiet, reverent, and filled with gratitude. Instead of fortresses, they built gardens. Instead of fleeing, they tended the land even more lovingly. Crops were gathered in abundance, not hoarded, but shared. Music filled every evening, soft chants of remembrance, notes drawn from the ocean's heartbeat. When the tremors began, gentle at first, then rolling like slow thunder, no one screamed. They simply held one another's hands and listened. "It is the deep tone of birth," they said. To the Lemurians, the end of an era was not a tragedy but a rite of passage. Every soul, every civilization, every world must one day dissolve into its elements so that the pattern can renew itself at a higher octave. They had been taught from childhood that matter remembers what it loves. So when the earth called them home, they did not resist. Their cities shimmered brighter than ever before, towers and domes alive with the last flowering of light. The people gathered on terraces and beaches, their eyes soft, their voices calm. They sang the song of the setting sun, a melody known to every heart since birth, said to open a door between what is seen and what is yet unseen. The sky responded. Clouds turned luminous from within, the colour of melted crystal. The horizon glowed not red but rose gold, as if the world itself were being forgiven. Waves moved inland, not as armies, but as pilgrims. The wind softened, carrying the scent of salt, flowers, and warm stone. In the moments between tremor and stillness, one could hear the city breathing, a low resonance from every structure, each wall and window releasing its last stored light in a slow, rippling pulse. Some gathered near the great resonant spire, the heart of the capital. It was said that when it sang, it could harmonize the frequency of an entire region. There, the highest adepts stood in quiet formation, weaving tones through the air with their voices and hands. They guided the city's vibration higher, lifting it above fear, turning grief into luminosity. Those who listened felt the sound not just in their ears, but through their bones, through their thoughts, through the very memory of being human. When the world changes form, the adepts said, carry this note within you. It will guide you to the next shore. And slowly, the great transition began. Across the continent, mountains softened, valleys deepened. The ground tilted in long, graceful bows. Crystalline spires swayed but did not shatter. They melted into light and rejoined the sea like dreams returning to their source. The Lemurians did not flee. They entered the waters singing, their garments billowing like banners of peace. The light of their cities lingered for hours, maybe days, beneath the waves, a network of radiant veins glowing from below, pulsing in time with the rhythm of the tides. Witnesses, those who later told the story through surviving legends, said the ocean shimmered for many nights afterward. Ships passing through the region long after the sinking spoke of glowing formations on the seafloor, like constellations turned inward, as if the heavens themselves had fallen asleep beneath the sea. Whether that light was real or only memory didn't matter. The Lemurians had fulfilled their purpose. They had remembered how to live in harmony with creation, and they had taught the earth itself how to fall gracefully into change. For them the cycle had not ended. It had only turned. They believed that fragments of their consciousness would rise again in new lands, in new forms of life, wherever compassion and curiosity met. Some said the Polynesians, the Mayans, the Himalayan sages, all carried echoes of Lemuria's song in their hearts. Each act of kindness, each quiet creation, each shared meal in peace was another measure in the melody of the world beginning again. And so, the great and gentle cycle closed its arc not with thunder, but with harmony. The continent of Mu slipped beneath the surface, leaving behind no ruins of pride, only the quiet proof that peace, once achieved, never truly disappears. It simply changes shape, light becoming water, sound becoming silence, life becoming life again. The Lemurians had no word for apocalypse. To them, what others would call an ending was simply a folding, a graceful refolding of the world back into its original pattern. When the first signs of the coming change began to show, there was no fear, only a collective recognition, quiet and serene, that the time of transition had arrived. They had been taught since childhood that every light must one day return to the source of its glow, every melody to the silence from which it was born. So when the whispers of the sinking sun began to drift through the air, the people only bowed their heads and listened. The prophecy was not written on tablets or scrolls. It lived in tone and memory, passed from elder to child through generations of gentle repetition. It spoke not of punishment, nor of wrath, but of rhythm, of the earth's deep breath preparing to change direction. The words, when spoken aloud, were simple. When the sun sings lower and the sea hums high, the land will turn inward to dream again. That was all. It did not tell them what to do. It told them how to be. In the years before the final turning, these signs grew clear enough for even the untrained heart to feel. The sunsets deepened until the sky glowed like warm copper. The air carried a sweetness unlike any before, as though the world itself were exhaling the perfume of its long life. The ground trembled now and then, not violently but like a sleeper shifting in bed. Rivers changed their songs, lower and slower, while the sea, once a bright companion, began to speak in tones so deep they could be felt more than heard. The Lemurians responded not with alarm but with reverence. "The planet is preparing its rest," said the elders. "Let us prepare with it." They began what they called the Great Attunement, a season of slowing down. Workdays grew shorter. Festivals became gentler, devoted less to celebration and more to gratitude. People spent more time in the gardens, talking to the roots and thanking them for their years of fruitfulness. Craftsmen completed their final works and polished their tools before setting them aside, not in despair, but with the satisfaction of artists who know the gallery is closing for the evening. In every city, the great resonance circles were built, open-air arenas of crystal and sand where citizens gathered to sing. They believed that sound was the bridge between spirit and matter, and that by surrounding their world with harmony, they could guide it through transformation. When the voices rose together, the air itself seemed to shimmer. The cities would glow faintly afterward, as though the stones had absorbed the sound and were humming it back into the bones of the earth. The Lemurians called this the luminous farewell. Children, who felt the energy shifts most acutely, were gathered and taught to breathe with the world, to match their inhale to the sea's advance and their exhale to its retreat. They laughed as they learned, and their joy became part of the ceremony. The elders said that this laughter was essential. The vibration of innocence would soften the journey ahead. The world, they told them, needs your laughter to stay light as it goes under. As the days shortened, the nights grew luminous. The ocean began to reflect not only the moon, but patterns of soft radiance rising from beneath the surface, vast geometries of light like underwater constellations. The Lemurians recognized them at once, the memory of their cities glowing beneath the waves, preparing to merge with the sea's eternal pulse. "The sinking sun has begun," whispered the seers. Yet even as they spoke, their voices were full of peace. One by one, the towers of the crystal cities dimmed their lights in honour. Bells were rung, not as alarms, but as invitations for meditation. People gathered in circles and held hands, closing their eyes while the ground gently shifted beneath them. They sang the chant of returning, a tone so low and beautiful that it seemed to come from the heart of the planet itself. The song was said to ease the Earth's labour, to help her descend in grace. At the heart of the capital, the great spire began to pulse, its resonance reaching every corner of the land. Scholars described the vibration as a bridge between states of being. Some said it was recalibrating matter to survive beneath the waves, while others believed it was guiding souls toward higher dimensions of light. The truth, as always in Lemuria, was likely both. The day came when the horizon turned to gold, and the sun seemed to hover longer than usual above the sea, as if reluctant to leave. The air felt heavier, not with dread but with completion. Flocks of white birds circled the coastlines in great spirals, their wings catching fire in the amber glow. On that evening, the Lemurians gathered for the final time at their resonance circles. From mountain terraces to coral shores, voices rose in one vast harmonic chord. The entire continent vibrated like a single instrument tuned to love. Then the tremors began in earnest. Not sharp, not chaotic, but steady and rhythmic. The earth's crust moved like breath, deep and slow. Water began to flow into the lower valleys, shimmering with light that came not from the sky but from within the ground itself. The people did not run. They stood together, arms linked, eyes lifted toward the descending sun. When the first great waves approached, they knelt. "Mother returns to mother," they whispered. One by one, the crystal towers bowed into the rising tide. Their lights dimmed not in defeat but in surrender, glowing a final time before becoming part of the ocean's body. The songs of the Lemurians grew softer, until they were only hums carried on the wind. The continent of Mu, the radiant heart of the First Age, descended beneath the sea as gently as a candle lowering into water, its flame extinguished only to become reflection. Those who believe the story say that in certain places in the Pacific the water still carries that sound, a faint hum, neither wind nor current, like a note sustained beyond hearing. Fishermen say it rises strongest at sunset, when the horizon turns the colour of memory, and if you close your eyes then, they say, you can still feel the prophecy fulfilled, not as tragedy, but as a perfect cadence at the end of a vast and beautiful song. Long before the final tremor came, the Lemurians knew their time upon the great continent was closing. The prophets and the dreamers had seen it in meditation, visions of shining ships drifting silently across mist-covered seas, carrying fragments of their wisdom to lands not yet known. They called it the Great Seeding. Not an escape, not a survival plan, but a gift. The world, they believed, would soon forget their name but remember their kindness. The preparations were quiet, deliberate, filled with ceremony and calm. All across the continent, people gathered the essence of their civilization. Not gold or jewels, not monuments or treasures, but knowledge, harmony, and light. Their teachers condensed vast libraries of learning into crystals etched with sound and frequency, humming softly like sleeping stars. These were their seeds of remembering. Each crystal contained melodies of healing, maps of the stars, lessons on the language of trees and tides. They were designed to awaken only when held by those whose hearts resonated with peace. Artisans shaped luminous vessels, half ship and half living being, their hulls grown from translucent coral strengthened by song. These vessels needed no oars, no wind. They moved by resonance, following the pull of vibration rather than current. At night they glowed faintly blue, like pieces of the moon set adrift. Within them sat families, scholars, healers, and singers chosen not by rank, but by attunement. The ones who could carry the memory of Lemuria into other lands without burden or pride. When the first of these ships was completed, the people held a gathering they called the Sending of the Light. There was no weeping. They believed no distance could truly separate those bound by frequency. Instead, the air filled with a gentle humming, the same note that had once built their cities. The elders sang the ancient tones of farewell, their voices blending with the sea until it seemed the water itself was singing back. From the shores, hundreds of vessels began to move, drifting outward into the endless horizon. Each ship left a trail of luminous mist that shimmered like silver threads, connecting one to another across the waves. Some headed east, guided by constellations known only to the navigators. Others followed the setting sun toward distant islands. A few turned north, their hearts drawn by unseen magnetic whispers. Wherever they went, the Lemurians believed the world would meet them halfway, like a breath answering a sigh. They did not intend to rule or colonize the lands they reached. Their mission was simpler and purer, to seed remembrance, to plant in the soil of younger civilizations the idea that life could be lived in harmony, that spirit and matter were never separate, that love was not emotion but geometry, the perfect meeting of intention and balance. In each new place they landed, they shared what the locals could receive: a song, a symbol, a small act of beauty. Then they vanished, again into legend, leaving behind stories of radiant visitors who arrived by starlight and spoke in tones that healed wounds. Some travelled east to the highlands that would one day be Asia, teaching the art of inner sound that later became sacred chants and mantras. Others reached the islands of the Pacific, where their knowledge of navigation would echo in the Polynesians' deep mastery of stars and currents. A few are said to have journeyed west to distant Africa, bringing the memory of light geometry that later shaped pyramids and temples. The Lemurians never sought recognition. They only cared that the song continued. Among them was a small group known as the Keepers of Breath. Their duty was to carry the spiritual science of resonance itself, the understanding that creation begins not with form, but with vibration. Wherever they went, they would teach that sound can mend, that word can heal, that silence can birth universes. They would settle for a generation or two, pass on their knowledge, and then disappear quietly, their work complete. Legends in many lands remember such visitors, tall, serene people who spoke in harmonies rather than speech, who built with sound instead of tools, who left when the wind changed. Some were remembered as gods, others as angels, most simply as the first ones. But all the stories carry the same afterglow, the warmth of a presence that did not demand belief, only understanding. Back on the sinking continent, those who remained continued their preparations. They sent light to guide the travellers, beams of soft gold rising from the spires each evening and bending toward the direction of their departing kin. The oceans answered with quiet phosphorescence, waves glowing with remembrance, a mournful yet hopeful farewell. The Lemurians on the ships could see that glow far behind them, following like a living, luminous thread through the endless night. They knew that as long as that ethereal glow remained, the profound connection between them and their homeland, a bond forged in millennia, would never truly break. It was a promise whispered across the vastness of the sea that their spirit would endure. On the final evening, as the sun hung low and red, bleeding its last light over the horizon, the last of the emissaries departed. The shorelines were already thinning, the ancient beaches silently slipping under calm, indifferent water. The elders, their faces etched with the wisdom of ages, stood on the terraced slopes, hands joined in a circle of unwavering unity, watching their people fade into the golden mist of the twilight. They sang one final time, a song not of sorrowful farewell, but of joyous arrival, a resounding promise that wherever the ships would ultimately land, Lemuria would bloom again in spirit, in memory, and in the hearts of its descendants. The ocean, a vast and ancient listener, carried their harmony outward, spreading it like pollen on a global wind, a seed of new beginnings. Some say that in the years that followed, the energy of the Lemurian light, a radiant echo of their advanced consciousness, rose again wherever love and conscious awareness gathered, in sacred mountains that touched the sky, in temples built to the rhythm of the stars and the celestial dance, in songs that echoed across sun-baked deserts and through the emerald depths of ancient jungles. Others say that the Lemurians, in their ultimate act of transcendence, became one with the sea itself, their collective consciousness flowing in the eternal currents, whispering ancient secrets to whales, guiding the intricate migrations of countless species, teaching coral to grow in patterns of sacred geometry, a living testament to their enduring presence. Whether truth or myth, a whispered legend or a profound reality, the legacy remained, woven into the very fabric of the planet. And even now, when the sun, a fiery orb, lowers into the vast expanse of the Pacific Ocean, and the horizon blushes with that ancient, ineffable rose-gold hue, there are moments, brief, luminous, almost imperceptible, when the sea glimmers in long, slow, rhythmic pulses, like a heart beating in the depths. Some say it is merely the play of light refracting through the water, a trick of the eye. Others, with a deeper understanding, say it is the enduring memory of those luminous ships, still drifting between worlds, between dimensions, carrying the gentle, unwavering pulse of Lemuria, the precious gift that was never truly lost, only planted deep in the fertile heart of humankind, waiting for its time to blossom anew. The final dawn of Lemuria came not as a storm but as a benediction. The sea was calm that morning, glassy and infinite, reflecting the pale blush of a sun that seemed to linger, reluctant to rise fully. The air carried the fragrance of salt, jasmine, and the faint metallic tang of lightning far beyond the horizon. The people awoke in silence, not to alarm or command, but to a deep and mutual knowing. This would be the day the earth completed her slow turning inward, the day their paradise would fold softly into the sea. For days, tremors had rippled through the land like the exhalations of a great sleeper shifting position. The rivers ran with gentle urgency, their courses bending toward the ocean as though returning home. The crystal towers that had once hummed with music now glowed faintly beneath the morning mist, their light dimmed to the soft pulse of a resting heart. Birds flew lower than usual, their wings brushing rooftops as they circled unafraid. Even the air seemed thick with compassion, as if nature herself were trying to cushion what was to come. The Lemurians gathered along the terraces, beaches, and mountain paths that overlooked the ocean. Entire families stood hand in hand, faces turned toward the horizon, their expressions neither sorrowful nor afraid. The elders began to hum, the low, steady note that marked the beginning of all ceremonies. Gradually others joined in, until the entire continent vibrated with sound. The pitch was neither mournful nor triumphant, it was acceptance itself. Their chant resonated through the earth, harmonizing with the subtle frequencies of the planet's shifting crust. They were not resisting the end, they were participating in it. As the sun climbed higher, the first of the crystal cities began to shimmer more brightly, as though awakening one final time. The buildings reflected the light into spiraling beams that reached toward the heavens, forming vast columns of gold and rose that pierced the clouds. Witnesses would later say that for a few brief hours, Lemuria looked like a continent made entirely of light, its mountains radiant, its rivers turned to molten silver, its fields shimmering as if the land itself had become transparent. Then the ground began to sigh, not with the violent tremor of an earthquake, but a long tender exhalation that rippled across the hills, a wave of gentle undulation. The sea too responded, rising to meet the land's sorrow, wave by gentle wave, climbing the shores with a reverence that felt ancient and profound. The Lemurians standing on the receding earth sang louder now, their voices weaving into the rhythm of the water. The notes rose and fell like the very tides themselves, each tone a heartfelt farewell, each chord a profound blessing. Their voices remarkably did not waver. There was no crack of fear, no tremble of despair. In that sustained harmony was the unwavering strength of generations who had never known conquest, who had lived their lives, guided by kindness and compassion, and who would now depart from this world with grace, their spirits unburdened. Temples of resonance, crafted with incredible artistry, dissolved first. Their crystal walls, which had once shimmered with captured light, melted into streams of pure light that flowed downward, merging with the ocean's depths. Bridges of woven quartz, once strong and vibrant, softened, bending into luminous ribbons before vanishing entirely as if pulled into another dimension. The great resonant spire, the pulsating heart of their civilization, pulsed one last brilliant blue, a final, poignant beacon, and then dimmed, its intricate vibration fading into the planet's deeper, timeless song. The people watched in a profound stillness, their gazes unwavering as their cities, vibrant and alive moments before, folded inward like delicate flowers at dusk, returning to the earth from which they had been born. Mothers lifted their children, holding them close so they could see this extraordinary heartbreaking spectacle, whispering, "Remember this light, it is what you are," imbuing them with the essence of their shared heritage. Fathers with quiet strength held their hands open to the rising tide, allowing the cool salt water to fill their palms, a final embrace of the element that was now claiming their home. Elders, with their ancient wisdom, traced intricate circles in the sand that glowed with an ethereal light, for a brief, magical moment before disappearing under the relentless rising foam. No one ran in panic. No one fought against the inevitable. They had always believed, with an unwavering conviction, that fear distorts the pure tone of the soul, and they wished, above all else, to meet their fate in perfect pitch, in harmony with the cosmos, their spirits unblemished by terror. The sun began to descend, and the sea glowed with impossible beauty, bands of violet and gold dancing on its surface like silk in the wind. The water now reached the lower terraces, curling around pillars, filling courtyards, lifting petals and leaves into its embrace. The Lemurians continued to sing. Their harmonies drifted across the surface of the waves, carried far out into the open ocean. Fishermen in distant islands, centuries later, would speak of strange songs rising from beneath the sea at twilight, notes so pure they made the heart ache with longing and peace. When the last light of the day touched the horizon, the final city gave its farewell. Its towers flashed once, brighter than the sun, then dimmed and vanished beneath the surface. A moment of silence followed, total and perfect silence, as though the world had paused to honour what had just transpired. Then came a new sound, a soft hum from the deep, the earth's acknowledgement of its children's return. Night fell over an empty sea. The stars emerged, their reflections rippling where land had once been. And for a long time, the water glowed faintly from below, as if the memory of Lemuria still burned within its depths. Sailors who crossed those waters in later ages spoke of strange luminescent currents, of dreamlike visions in the moonlight where they thought they saw towers under the waves, flickering like candles. Perhaps it was only imagination, or perhaps, as the Lemurians had always said, nothing truly ends, it only changes form. In that vast and gentle submergence, the continent of Mu fulfilled its purpose. It had taught the earth what harmony could be. It had shown humanity what a civilization built on compassion, beauty and peace might look like. Its disappearance was not an erasure, but an integration. The light of Lemuria dissolving into the wider world, carried by water, by wind, by memory. And so, beneath the Pacific, beneath the weight of ages the continent sleeps. Its crystal cities rest in silence, their lights dim but not gone. The song that once filled the air still hums faintly in the ocean's depths, waiting for any heart quiet enough to hear it. For the Lemurians believed that someday, when the world is ready to live gently again, the sea will give back what it took, not in land, but in wisdom. The lost will rise not from beneath the waves, but from within us, where Lemuria has always been, a luminous continent of the soul, dreaming in the deep, waiting to awaken once more. Though Lemuria had fallen into the embrace of the sea, its memory did not vanish. It dispersed, as light through a prism. Its wisdom refracted into many cultures, its spirit carried on salt winds and ocean currents. What remained was not the land, but the resonance. The world still hummed with the music of Mu, and there were those who could hear it. They became the keepers of the memory, and through them, Lemuria continued to breathe. The first echoes appeared across the great Pacific expanse. On islands that would one day be called Hawaii, Easter Island, Tahiti and Samoa, travellers from distant ages told stories of ancestral homelands swallowed by the sea. The Polynesians called it Hawaii, the sacred origin from which their people journeyed, guided only by the stars. The Maori spoke of Hawaii Nui, the vast homeland of light and warmth that existed before memory. And on the cliffs of Rapa Nui, the colossal stone figures, silent, patient, eternal, seemed to gaze westward, as if keeping vigil for the vanished continent that once shone there. Even the waves told the story. The ocean's rhythm around those islands follows a pulse almost musical, rising and falling in the same intervals described in the Lemurian chants that once resonated through their crystal halls. The Polynesian navigators, using only stars, wind, and intuition, retraced ancient routes across thousands of miles of ocean. To them, the sea was not emptiness, it was memory. The constellations were not maps, but songs, and each island a note in the continuing melody of a civilization that refused to die. High on the slopes of Hawaii's Mauna Kea, the descendants of those who carried Lemuria's spark built their own observatories, not of crystal, but of quiet intention. They read the heavens with the same reverence as their forebears, believing that the stars were both ancestors and teachers. In the stillness of night, when wind sweeps over volcanic rock, one can almost hear that same deep resonance that once filled the Lemurian sky, the slow, patient heartbeat of the earth aligning with the hum of the cosmos. Further east, in lands that would later be called the Andes, myths of Viracocha, the radiant god who rose from the sea to teach humanity, bear uncanny resemblance to Lemurian lore. He too brought knowledge of light, balance, and sacred geometry. Across oceans, across epochs, fragments of the same dream appeared again and again, teachers of peace emerging from the water, carrying the memory of a lost golden age. It was as if Lemuria had scattered its seeds deliberately across the planet, ensuring that no matter how much time passed, the pattern could one day reassemble itself in spirit. Even the very energy of the earth seemed to hold an ancient living memory, a profound resonance that speaks of a civilization long past. Certain power spots across the globe, Hawaii, with its volcanic heart and vibrant spirit, Easter Island, a silent sentinel of colossal moai, shrouded in mystery, and the mystical Mount Shasta, piercing the California sky with its snow-capped peak, vibrate with a unique and undeniable resonance. It is as though the planet itself has meticulously preserved Lemuria's profound frequency, a blueprint of a harmonious existence. Travellers drawn to these sacred lands often speak of an inexplicable calm that settles upon their souls, a deep sense of peace that transcends the everyday. They report vivid visions that flicker through their dreams, images of an ancient past and an unsettling yet comforting sensation that they have been here before, as if recognizing a forgotten home. In these extraordinary places it is as if the veil between past and present thins, allowing echoes of an ancient era to ripple through time, touching those who are open to their whisper. The Lemurians, in their deep spiritual understanding, believe the earth possessed the capacity to remember love, to retain the pristine imprint of pure, harmonious energy, and perhaps, in these extraordinary locations, she truly does, offering glimpses into a forgotten golden age. At Mount Shasta, in the far reaches of what would one day become the Golden State of California, legends have persisted for centuries, whispering tales of glowing beings seen at twilight, tall, serene figures seemingly wrapped in an ethereal light that shimmers with otherworldly beauty. Locals reverently call them the Elder Ones, and it is said that they dwell in hidden caverns deep within the mountain's majestic interior, diligently guarding the precious remnants of Lemuria's profound wisdom, a legacy of enlightened understanding. Some, swayed by modern skepticism and a preference for empirical evidence, dismiss these enduring stories as mere myth, fanciful narratives born of an imaginative past, a product of human longing for the extraordinary. Yet those who have climbed the rugged slopes in silence, seeking a deeper connection to the mountain's essence, sometimes report a faint, almost imperceptible hum beneath their feet, a mesmerizing sound like crystal wind chimes resonating in the distance, or the harmonious echoes of a faraway choir, ethereal and captivating. Perhaps it is merely the colossal mountain itself, settling into its eternal geological rhythm, a symphony of shifting earth and ancient stone, a natural phenomenon. Or perhaps, just perhaps, it is the earth remembering, singing the silent song of a lost civilization. Wherever Lemuria once was, it never truly left, its essence interwoven with the fabric of existence, its knowledge of healing through frequency and the subtle energies of the universe, of unity through compassion and the interconnectedness of all life, of balance through beauty and the sacred geometry of creation, survived in countless forms, threads woven into the tapestry of human culture. This ancient wisdom manifests in the Polynesian chants that summon tides with powerful incantations, in the Buddhist mantras that still the heart and awaken inner peace, and in the sacred geometry carved into temples from Peru to Angkor, each line and curve a testament to a universal truth. Each is a translation of the same profound truth. The divine is not above us, an external deity watching from afar, but within every vibration of the world, residing in the very essence of existence, a living presence accessible to all who seek it. The Lemurians believed memory could sleep but never die. That belief proved true. The dream of Mu continues to surface wherever humans choose peace over power, creation over conquest, harmony over hierarchy. It rises in the lullabies sung to children, in the rhythm of oars on quiet seas, in the soft hum of a heart that remembers something it cannot name. And so, though the crystal towers rest beneath the waves, Lemuria endures, not as ruins, but as resonance. Its wisdom pulses through time, waiting for hearts gentle enough to hear it again. Those who listen closely to the ocean at dusk say the sound is still there, just beneath the surface, a faint, soothing chord that reminds the soul of home. It is the voice of Lemuria, whispering across the centuries, "We did not vanish. We became the tide." The sea had closed over Lemuria, but the world did not end. It only exhaled. Beneath miles of water and time, the luminous cities slept. Whole cathedrals of crystal now silent, gardens resting beneath the drifting silt, temples of resonance still glowing faintly in the dark. What had been civilization became symphony. The light that once radiated upward through air now pulsed softly through the deep, spreading like heartbeat waves across the ocean floor. There were no ruins in the way the later world would understand them. The Lemurians had not left behind broken stones or shattered idols. They had left frequencies, echoes encoded in water and quartz, still vibrating with memory. Some said that whales, the great singers of the sea, had inherited their tones. Their long, undulating songs rising from the depths were the continuation of Lemuria's music, a language older than sorrow, older than words. Every note a message. We are not gone. We have only changed form. Above, the continents drifted, their slow ballet across the Earth's surface marking the passage of eons. The millennia folded over themselves like calm waves over sleeping sand, each layer burying deeper the memories of what came before. But every so often, a ripple in human history, a whisper carried on the wind of forgotten times, caught the memory again. A a flicker of that first piece, a primordial harmony now shrouded in myth. It appeared in dreams and visions, in ancient chants and mystic philosophies, in the foundational narratives of nearly every culture that spoke of a golden age lost beneath the sea. Atlantis became the echo most remembered, its fabled grandeur resonating through Western thought. But even that name was a shadow, a more recent refraction of something deeper, something far older. Lemuria was the first whisper, the primal memory of a lost paradise in the vastness of the Pacific. In monasteries high among towering mountains, where the air was thin and silence reigned, monks practiced profound meditations that slowed the heart until it beat in rhythm with the very pulse of the earth, a profound technique believed to have been first taught by the enigmatic children of the sun and stars, ancient masters of cosmic wisdom. In the scattered Pacific islands, navigators of unparalleled skill read the waves not only with their keen eyes, but with their entire bodies, sensing the subtle pull of unseen energies and currents beneath the surface, navigating by an intuitive understanding passed down through generations. In sacred architecture across the globe, from the intricately carved Mayan temples reaching for the sky to the serene dome-shaped stupas of the Himalayas, the same fundamental ratios and spirals returned again and again. The geometry of breath, the mathematics of remembrance, embedded in stone and spirit, a silent testament to a shared, forgotten heritage. These were not mere coincidences, but echoes of a universal knowledge, fragments of a grand design, once understood by the inhabitants of Lemuria. Humanity, though it had forgotten the name Lemuria, could never quite forget the feeling of it, that deep cellular longing for peace without submission, knowledge without pride, connection without loss. It is the same ache that draws us to the sea, to stillness, to beauty. Some nights, when the tide is slow and the moon lies close to the horizon, that longing becomes almost audible, a pulse behind the ears, a whisper at the edge of sleep. In those sacred moments, it is said, the veil thins and the temporal boundaries between past and present dissolve. The subconscious, no longer tethered by the rigid confines of the everyday, brushes against an ancient resonant frequency and, in that profound touch, remembers. A deep inherent wisdom stirs within, a recognition of truths long dormant. The sharpness of pain softens, its edges blunted by a deeper understanding. Time, that relentless master, loosens its grip, its urgency fading into a gentle flowing current, and the heart, unburdened and open, expands just enough to glimpse a profound transformative truth. That paradise is not a geographical location, a mythical isle to be discovered on ancient maps, but rather a profound pattern of being, a state of harmonious existence. The Lemurians, those legendary inhabitants of a submerged continent, had simply mastered what the greater portion of humanity continues to seek with ceaseless effort, the exquisite art of existing in perfect, effortless harmony with everything that surrounds them, from the gentle whisper of the wind to the deepest currents of the ocean, from the smallest creature to the vast expanse of the cosmos. And though their physical land was irrevocably taken by the relentless embrace of water, their luminous example remained, suspended not in a physical space but between worlds, in the ether of collective memory, patiently waiting to be rediscovered not by the arduous efforts of material explorers and cartographers, but by the sensitive souls of dreamers, by those attuned to the subtler frequencies of existence. Those who choose to walk alone along the vast, shimmering Pacific shores at the twilight hour, as the sun dips below the horizon in a blaze of colour, sometimes feel it, a profound, inexplicable sensation. A strange, pervasive calm descends, wrapping around them like a comforting embrace, a warmth that seems to emanate directly from the vast, ancient sea itself. There is a quiet, almost imperceptible sense that the ocean, in its immense, inscrutable depths, is not merely a body of water, but a living, aware entity, holding secrets untold. Some, in those hushed moments, claim to hear faint, ethereal chimes, a delicate music resonating from beneath the waves, a melody that seems to echo from forgotten eons. Others speak of seeing pale, shimmering glimmers deep below the surface, fleeting lights that dance in the abyssal darkness, as if distant lamps, tended by unseen hands, still burned under the water, casting their soft glow into the submerged world. Science, ever seeking rational explanation, might attribute these phenomena to the mesmerizing display of bioluminescence, the living light of myriad organisms. But the soul, in its deeper wisdom, calls it by another name: recognition. A profound, instantaneous understanding that resonates with an ancient memory. Perhaps that, in its essence, is how the story of Lemuria was truly meant to end. Not with the dramatic unearthing of crumbling ruins, nor with the deciphering of forgotten glyphs etched into weathered stone, but with the quiet, profound reawakening of peace remembered, a harmony that transcends the physical realm. Lemuria's true, enduring legacy was never destined to be found in tangible stone or perishable text, in archaeological digs or dusty archives. It was always meant to awaken within the deepest recesses of the human spirit, in the profound silence that precedes the gentle embrace of sleep, in the soft, rhythmic pulse of waves as they caress the shore, a timeless lullaby. It was meant to stir in that pivotal moment when a human heart, weary of the relentless divisions and discordant clamour of the modern world, begins once more to hum in perfect resonant tune with the vast interconnected symphony of the universe. And so, the great enigmatic continent rests, not in a state of inert oblivion, but in a vibrant, transformed existence. Its people, in a profound metamorphosis, have become the very current of life, the illuminating light that guides, the intricate rhythm of creation itself, woven into the fabric of existence. Whenever love arises spontaneously and unbidden, whenever compassion, in its quiet, unassuming strength, triumphs over the pervasive shadow of fear, a precious piece of Lemuria rises once more. It emerges not from the cold, unfathomable depths of the physical ocean, but from the radiant, boundless depths of our own inner being. Each deliberate act of harmony, each gesture of interconnectedness, another island of consciousness emerging from the vast, often turbulent sea of forgetfulness. For Lemuria was never truly lost in the way a physical object is misplaced or vanishes from sight. It was only waiting, patiently, eternally, for humanity to remember its inherent wisdom, to reclaim the lost art of harmony, and to once again resonate with the sacred frequency of paradise within. The dream of Lemuria continues, not as history, but as heartbeat. Beneath the waves, within the silence, its song still drifts through the world, reminding all who listen that peace was once real and can be real again. In every kind word, every moment of beauty, every gentle breath shared between beings, the lost paradise awakens. Lemuria sleeps, but humanity dreams it back to life. Thank you for joining us on this journey into a dream of the past. If these whispers of a lost world have soothed your spirit, you can help other souls discover this place of peace by subscribing. Until the next legend calls to you from the deep, may your slumber be profound and your dreams be luminous. Sleep well.